held on. Through 3 nights of wrath, our trees catapulted against our roofs, the ground fading farther away, our fences gnarled in fury, our cars subjugated to the water. When Neptune raised his trident in our direction, we held our breath like a sinking ship. In Houston, where the grief of loss and the weight of surviving bear the same burden, we have decided we will not be a lost city. Over 3,000 of us, like a bleeding lone star, branded ourselves at the George R. Brown Convention Center with hands outstretched to help. Thousands more tethering themselves to provide local aid. Today, Houston is not destitute. It is a hope-brimming pan. It is a rodeo in riptide waiting to reemerge. If we have learned anything, it is how the current can bend us back to human, how a miracle can manifest as canned goods and a smile, how we can water the graves of those lost without drowning in the sorrow, and it is a heavy thing, but not unbearable. The rivers can take our streets, but never wash off this Texan pride. The rivers can take our roads, but never have our bigger than normal hope. The waters can flatten us down to a puddle of tears, but even that means that we can still feel, so we haven't lost everything. We just have it all to gain again.
As we move into a time of sharing for joys and concerns, I would like to invite each of you to think about what is heavy on your heart and mind this morning, or some piece of joy that you would like to share with the congregation. And I really think that this is an appropriate time if any of you do have loved ones in Florida or in the path of the catastrophes that have happened over the past 10 days to 2 weeks, that you could come up and share and give a name or speak the name from there. And Barb is coming up to remind us about something else.
Tomorrow is the 16th anniversary of 9/11. My husband and I were biking in Vermont. We had people from our bike tour who couldn't get back home. Planes were grounded for 3 whole days. All we did when we finished biking in Vermont, we drove into Canada and came back here. And tomorrow is the 16th anniversary of 9/11.
I'm Tony Davis. I'm up here to tell you about 2 members of our church, Christy and Henry Millett. How many of you have been on Facebook lately? Not many. They are on Facebook. They left Wednesday morning for Florida. They sold their house here, and they left Wednesday morning with Freckles, their dog, Sophie, their cat. Henry was past president of the executive board here, for those who didn't know him, and his wife was chair for buildings and grounds for many, many years. So they were very active and will be missed greatly. Well, anyway, when they left last Thursday, they got as far as Georgia. They couldn't go any farther. Law people will not let anyone through unless you're with DTE or consumers. So they had to backtrack, and they are now back north up in Athens, Tennessee, all 4 of them. And they got one of the last places to stay because people from Georgia are evacuating also. Well, they will be there until Tuesday. And hopefully, if things don't look right, they're going to be there longer. So I would just like to update all of you here to know what's going on with our fellow past members. Thank you.
Tracy Martin, now that you mention it, I do have a brother living in Inverness, 60 miles northwest of Orlando. When the first models came out, they had this storm going up the east coast and then veering out into the ocean before it got as far north as the Orlando latitude. Then all of a sudden it changed and it was going directly up the middle. Now it's changed again and it's going up the west coast, which brings it even further closer to him. We've been in constant contact with him, of course. Last I talked to him yesterday, he was still convinced that he knew he couldn't stay in his trailer home. That was a given, but he does have a friend with a block home that was built after Andrew, so it was built according to the Andrew codes. But I don't know what strength this thing is going to be when it gets up to the Orlando area. I saw it one time and it was a Hurricane 1. So we don't know, but he probably is hunkering down right now.
So, good morning. My name is Liz Knight. I had in my mind I wanted to come and share some joy today because I knew that a lot of people would probably have the thoughts and prayers of their family members. I have several who are out of harm's way, but nonetheless don't know what they're going to be coming back to. But yesterday I had the opportunity to go to Dally in the Alley. It was the 40th anniversary of a street fair that happens in the Midtown Cass Corridor just south of Wayne State. My brother and sister-in-law live there in a 100-year-old house, and their garage is the beer tent and merchandise tent. So it's quite the party. But the nice thing about it is a couple things. One, that area is very diverse and very progressive. So to see all the different people in the community, everything out and about, enjoying themselves and having a good time of all ages, was such a joy to myself. And then also I know from a progressive standpoint, from kind of what's going on in the politics and things, there were a lot of tents and people with petitions and getting people active and involved in not only the local community, but the state and federal level as well. So just something really nice. The weather was beautiful. The music was great. I think they ran out of beer at like 6 o'clock. So it was a good time for the community as well. So.
I'm Dennis Monti, and my son Jeffrey, who grew up in this church for 18 years, is headed to Florida tomorrow with a crew of 3 other guys from his employer. He does maintenance work at Metro Airport on the baggage carriers and things like that. So their company is sending this crew down to Florida tomorrow. They're going to be camping, unless they can find some place to stay. But they're going to be camping in Florida, so be an interesting week for him and his crew to see what they can, how they can help.
So my name's Ann Patrice Foley, and thanks Dennis for sharing that. Maybe they could stay at my brother's house. Anyways, I would like a candle lit for many family members, like about 18 cousins I have all over Florida, and a niece and 3 nephews. But mostly for my brother, Jim, who lives in St. Petersburg and has a lot of mental limitations and feels he's unable to leave his home and his animals, and so I worry a lot about him right now. He told me yesterday he's not prepared.
Hi, My name's Megan Chenoweth. Some of you who I've met before may know my husband is an archaeologist, and he does his field work in the British Virgin Islands, which have been completely leveled, basically, by the hurricanes. So we're thinking of our friends Debs and Scott and their daughter Riley and their little business that they have, and all of the people who have lost homes and property, and wishing them the best to rebuild.
Hi, I'm Kelly Petrie. My mother has all her family down in Florida, and they're just holding up in their houses with, boarding up the windows and everything. And a friend who's down there with a 100-year-old mother, also, they're just hiding in a closet. So we hope that they're safe.
I'm Hannah Donegan, and our son lives in Austin and his family, and luckily they didn't get much of the Harvey. They had a lot of rain for the week, but everybody was worried. And then, speaking of Irma in Florida, we have a lot of friends and relatives there. And my daughter Janine went to Western Michigan and has a good friend, Keith Fuller, who's a teacher still there, and she teaches in Farmington Hills. But anyway, we know Keith very well. And his school district in Kalamazoo gave him time off, and he's counseling people in Texas, because that came first. But we have a lot of friends and relatives. We've been texting, and luckily they're all okay, except I have to contact one niece. I don't know. She lives in a meager modular home, so I wrote her, but I don't know if she still has that same mobile number. So anyway, we're all blessed. We complain about our ice and snow in the winter, but I tell you, this is just horrendous for all of us to have to experience.
On a happier note, I'm Bud Baggett, and Dot had a birthday Friday. She's 89. Sadly, she didn't know it, but she is.
And I'm lighting this last candle for all the joys and concerns that each of you carries in your heart, and also connects to other people in this congregation as our web of community continues to get stronger. I'd like to start this morning's message with a story called Two Rivers by Christopher Boyce. Once upon a time, there were two rivers flowing side by side. Both rivers liked to argue about who was the best. "The water in my river is better than the water in your river," said one. "No, the water in my river is better than your river," said the other. And the two rivers would flow along all day arguing about which river was the best. Both were quite sure they were the greatest. "Doesn't my water make a more joyful sound as it runs over the smooth, polished pebbles on my bottom? And look at the way that the sun reflects on the ripples and the eddies that form around the granite boulders at my edge. These things are so beautiful. Surely I am the best river," said the first. And then the other river replied, "Oh, but look at the fish that swim in my clear, cool water. Have you heard the frogs singing at night? They live in the reeds and lilies that grow on my banks, and I am home to so many wonderful creatures. Surely I must be the very best river." So the two of them continued to argue until one day something strange and unexpected happened. The rivers rounded a bend, slid down a small falls, and suddenly saw that they were flowing towards something much bigger and greater than themselves. Up ahead were big crashing waves and water as far as you could see. They continued to rush faster and faster, and still the waters from both rivers churned together into the vast and enormous ocean. Then a sound came from the sky. It came from a cloud that chuckled for a moment and then said, "Now see how foolish you have been arguing about who is the best. There is no highest or lowest. There is no greatest or least. All things are one, and all are joined together, like rivers that meet in the sea." So as we continue our homecoming water communion service, we can look at what those two images hold for us. Water from rivers and oceans, water communion, fresh water being blessed with a cup of Dixie cup, holding our blessings in a few moments of our service, and we can look at homecoming. When we think about homecoming, it will bring up different images for each of us. I know lately homecoming has become a whole different idea for me because my thoughts and my checkbook are in alignment to help my granddaughters get ready for homecoming dresses in their late September football games and dances. But for most of us, homecoming means entering into a place of hospitality, of food and drink and comfortableness and warmth and acceptance of the guest. An elder member who I used to visit 15 years ago in another congregation, she had made many moves, and she's one of the heroes, like many of you are to me, because I can't seem to get a bookshelf straightened out. But many of you have had to downsize, and she has downsized to a small condominium. And when I went to visit her, although she had trouble walking without her walker, she always had a big glass of ice water waiting for me next to the chair she wanted me to occupy during our visit. She didn't wait for me to come in and ask if I needed a beverage or wanted a beverage. Who can refuse a glass of water? That small gesture made me always feel at home, in her home. Hospitality, simplicity, and there it was. Whereas it was a different experience one year when I was interviewed as a possible candidate for a senior minister position at a church in someone else's very elaborate home in a very fancy area. I was not offered a glass of water or anything. They had the whole search committee had just eaten pizza, and the boxes were stacked behind the host. It was summer and there was no air conditioning in the household, and I guess no water. I think of the biblical story of Martha and Mary. It may be familiar to some of you. When reviewing the roles of Martha and Mary, we look at how you need to have balance in homecoming. The nurturing and physical needs, and then the attention to the relationships and conversation. These two roles are equally important, whether in making a homecoming with congenial hospitality in your home or here in this church home. From Luke 10:38-42. Now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her house. And she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving. And she went up to him and said, Lord, do not care, and do you not care, that my sister has left me to serve alone? Blame, shame, guilt. Makes me glad to be an only child. Tell her then to help me. But then the Lord answered her and said, Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her. And so the story goes, and if you studied any kind of Bible studies in your former life at other churches, you will know that that quote can bring up months of conversation. But the question to ask yourselves as Unitarian Universalists here, are you more like Mary, listening and discussing with the guest, or are you more like Martha, preparing food and cleaning up? Creating a hospitable homecoming requires attentiveness to the cultivation of the relationships and the offering of sustenance and physical comforts. Someone needs to greet the guests and visitors, and someone also needs to make sure the food and beverages are ready. Mid-sermon advertising. We need help. We need help for the Memorial Reception Committee. Susan Leitner has been doing this for years, and she is willing to train a team of people that could not even replace her, but a team of people that will be prepared to both be the Marys and the Marthas for any upcoming memorial services. Another advertisement. You saw those children up here this morning? Everyone, if you're a new visitor, you will come to know and love these two initials, and they are R.E., religious education. If you are so inclined to be either a Martha or a Mary, please contact Natalie Case or Kelly Petrie, who is chair of the Religious Education Committee, to offer your services. It doesn't even hurt. It brings joy. So, Lynn Twist says, when the guest comes to your door, whether he be sad or despondent or in despair, the opportunity is there to host him. Invite him in. Ask him to have some tea. Have him sit down. He will know if he's hosted exactly right and how long to stay and exactly when to leave. But invite him in. Now, when to stay and when to leave, that is up to each individual to read their host, and that is part of the hospitality dance. So I want you to think about why you come to a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Many of us come because we are Marys and we want to listen to new information and we want to discuss that important information. And then we want to go home and feel good that we have enlightened our spirits and our souls with new information. And then sometimes we sit down but most of you do not sit down. And if you do sit down, it's behind a computer and you start actions. Or you move on to looking to when our various committees will meet. So what I want you to think about is that little saying that people have, what happens in Las Vegas stays in Las Vegas, or what happens at the stag party stays at the stag party. We don't want to have that saying work. We want to know that what happens in our coffee hour and in our meeting house and in our services never just stays here. That you go out and take whatever message there is and move it into action, whether it's in your own letters, in places that you will have an impact, or joining the Social Justice Committee, or the different committees that Marie Laurie has started with Saving the World, etc. Because you can't save the whole world. Not one of us can save the whole world, but we can do the work that needs to be done. I did not let Yvonne know that I was going to call her out today, and she doesn't even need to raise her hand, because some of you will just say, we don't know who Yvonne is, but she's going down to the Eastern Market today to get signatures for the gerrymandering issues that need to be readjusted to make an impact on our area. So if you're looking for that good homecoming, then it's a place to be comforted and stimulated. Our friends are being threatened today by a hurricane. They live in a paradoxical situation daily. They have chosen to live in these beautiful settings and offer hospitality to all of us that get tired of our winters, and they have these beautiful temperatures and oceans, but the contradiction comes from Mother Nature, bringing storms of such power and destruction. It makes us rethink the risk of living where there is such beauty around us daily. So that is the third and last thought for you to think about, how we all live in paradox. It's a situation, a person, or a thing that combines contradictory features or qualities, or a seemingly absurd or self-contradictory statement or proposition that when you investigate it, it can be explained, and it may be a very good statement or action and be founded to be true. So the paradox of living in such locations as Texas and Florida and Georgia, offering all this scenery and the destruction and the balance, and what do we do? I was speaking to some friends last night, and they've attended a couple of services here, and I said, I'm supposed to get up and talk to people and give them some perfect words today. And there are no perfect words. We are sitting here as a congregation, each one of us, just maybe one person removed from knowing someone who is in a crisis not far from here, our neighbors and friends to the south. We cannot do anything today but learn from our Christian friends. The only thing that we can do is pray and focus our meditation or our thought in that direction for the best to come to our friends in Florida, and then wait. And then you will decide if you're a Martha or a Mary and how you will respond. And some of you will physically go to Florida and help, and others will send money, and others will wait to hear what the next call is so that we can respond. And that's what Unitarian Universalists do with their prayer. It's always prayer in action. There's a very sweet little saying, and I'm sure you'll hear it during the holidays, but you know, you talk about the three kings showing up at Jesus' birth, and they said, what if that was the three queens? They would have brought a casserole, a map, and a warm blanket. And so now is not the time to expect somebody else to respond. Now is the time to learn as Mary would, and move into service and action as Martha would. Each of you has your own way of creating homecoming. Sometimes it's truly from your heart and your spirit of opening a place in your expressions, in your personality, in your way of being to listening to each other. Today we showed that during Joys and Concerns. This church isn't just a building, it's a church home. It holds a place in your hearts. It is you, it is each of you, and it is you in relationship. You're in relationship with people who respect and share your values. You're in relationship with people that will ask forgiveness and give forgiveness when needed. You are part of a homecoming. You are part of a web and a net that offers comfort to one another. This year there are going to be times of celebration, and there's going to be time for justice work, discussing challenging topics and interesting topics, and then extending hospitality to the congregation and our new neighbors and friends. There will be times of paradox and metaphor, ritual and comfort. Each of us will have some of the answers, and none of us will have all of the answers. But together, we can create authentic community that will strengthen each other's lives. May we have the courage to go into the depth, to give tenderness when we can, and to offer respect in different ways. May you take the actions that need to be taken. And remember from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, he said, "What is essential is invisible to the eye." Keep your hearts, your hospitality, and your PIA. That would be a new one. Some of you, when I say PIA, I know you think it's something else, but it can be from here on in, prayer in action. Take it and make it the best that you can. Keep us informed as to the status of your loved ones and friends. And may today pass with the least amount of destruction possible. So be it. And we cannot have a campfire today. We can only have our joys and concerns to help us sing John Denver's closing song. Take me home, country roads, and the words are in your order of service. If you feel like you need to stand, you may stand. If you feel like you need to clap, you may clap.
Tree.
chancel or in the focal point. Each of you symbolically brings something to this congregation. You create this space to be a sanctuary and a place of safety. May you create home and hospitality in all the ways that will be made possible to reach out to our neighbors and friends that will be needing us, not in just the next day, but in the next years to come. So be it. Namaste.
enjoy just hanging out.
We all got sick from his dad, who tends to just like, I know. He doesn't like get out much. So anytime he takes a plane or anything, he always gets yeah, we're all in the tail of it.
See you tomorrow.
Yeah.